Welcome to the Lady Landlords podcast, where we empower women to gain financial independence through real estate investing. I'm your host, Becky Nova, founder of Lady Landlords. If you're ready to buy, manage, and grow your real estate portfolio, then let's get started. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. I am your host, the founder of Lady Landlords, Becky Nova. And today we are bringing you a member spotlight. This is a story from one of the ladies in our Lady Landlords community that has just been doing wonderful and inspirational things within the group and in her own real estate investment journey. And I would love to share her story with you. So Elsie, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And I got to say, for those on YouTube that are watching the video, I love what you got going on in the background. Like the house that you're in is just absolutely gorgeous. It is definitely like interest worthy for sure. It's very, very pretty there. So whereabouts are you located?
So I'm located just outside of Sacramento, California.
Gotcha. And what were you going to say about your background there?
So I do furnished rentals. And so this is just a bunch of extra decorations that haven't made it into a house yet.
Oh, really? Oh, that's so funny. Just for anybody that is then listening on the podcast and can't see Elsie's gorgeous background, it is just this gorgeous wood staircase, really just traditional kind of furnishings. It's gorgeous. And then some unique just flowers, plants, statues that it's just a really, really pretty background. So nice to see you have that eye for detail, especially for those furnished rentals.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Something that actually surprised me when I started all of this actually as well.
It was kind of a new skill that you learned, right?
Yes.
That's me in landscaping. Could not keep a cactus alive, but now I do the landscaping for all of our properties.
And you can out here and I can go there and, we can work this out.
I can't decorate anything, so I would love to do a swap for sure. But Elsie, if you could just share a little bit about who you are, the woman behind here, this great real estate portfolio. If you could just share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I manage the research department at a local children's hospital. I also run a dog rescue. So I foster special needs dogs and puppies. So that takes up a lot of my life. In general, I would just say that I am a workaholic. I have ADHD, so I'm always going. And so I keep myself pretty busy.
Exactly. It sounds like real estate itself is can be completely a full-time job. But then also for our listeners, Elsie and I were actually having a conversation before I hit record here, as we both work in clinical research. So it was just really nice. And I can say that that is a role that Elsie has that is very time intensive and is very, very important to patient care. So that takes up a ton of time. And then still to work for a dog rescue is also just fantastic work. So you definitely keep yourself busy. I will say that.
Yes, I do. And I like it that way. So it works out.
Right. One of the trends I've actually noticed with a lot of our women in Lady Landlords, and hopefully our listeners can identify with this, is we tend to be people that are looking to kind of grow personally. We are looking for like extra activities that really kind of provide us with value. So it sounds like that's something you've been able to do in your life too. You definitely fit that criteria.
Yeah, I'm very proud of the fact that I'm able to provide affordable housing to people who really need it. So it does fulfill me emotionally as well as financially.
Yes. Well, let's talk about that. So how did you even get into real estate investing? How did that even cross your path?
It was kind of an accident. So I grew up very poor. My mother was homeless for years. And so when I got my first job at 21, I've always been a workaholic. I started buying stock, like $50 a month or, $100 a month on like Share Builder, E-Trade. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up, when it was all said and done, like when I was ready to, like at 28, finally got married, ready to buy a house, I had like $30,000. So I was able to use that to put the down payment on our first house. And then when we bought the second house, we just didn't sell the first house. And so we then just had two houses. And then I was working two jobs, as I do, and I had an abundance of money because I have no children, two incomes for me plus my husband, right? So we're a 3-income family with two people. And so I was paying a ridiculous amount in taxes. Mm-hmm. So one of my friends was getting divorced. She was leaving her relationship and she could not find a rental for her and her pit bulls. So I bought a house for her to live in. Yeah, it seemed honestly at the time like I
Yes.
kind of felt good about it, but when I sold the
Yeah.
house, not so much, because then it was like like it kind of negated all the good feelings because I really did well on that deal.
Gotcha.
So
Well, we'll talk about kind of what happened like within
yeah,
that deal, because I know there's a story behind that.
yeah,
But that's really interesting that you really kind of started. So you had then your primary residence, then you grew into a second primary residence and you rented out the first, right? And
yes,
then when your friend was getting divorced, you bought now the third property, and
correct.
that was then a rental for her.
Yes.
Gotcha. So it is really cool. And we do talk about often the idea pit bulls are not necessarily the easiest and most accepted in a lot of properties. Some animals are not accepted in a lot of places, but then pit bulls too just add another layer of issue for a lot of landlords. So that was really great that you were able to provide housing for your friend.
Yeah,
So
I look for insurance companies that cover them. I mean, let's be honest, since there's so few options, that's one way you're going to make sure that your tenants are going to stay until they buy their own house, is if you're not only allowed to have them pets where you can charge more, but also allowing, all breeds. It definitely
mhm,
is going to keep those tenants in there for 9, 10 years. I've had some pretty long tenants because of the dogs.
right. And you're right. Like just the idea of even moving with animals themselves, it is hard to find a pet friendly place. There's also extra fees and extra deposits depending on what your state allows. But then adding a pit bull is then something that's going to take an extra layer because not all insurances allow those certain breeds. So when you have to go then get that different type of insurance that then would allow it, it costs the landlord a little bit more, but then also you can charge that rental higher. And then you're right, that tenant's not going to want to go anywhere else because to find that needle in the haystack again is not going to be so easy. So now your friend moves in, she's got her pit bulls, hopefully happier life after this divorce. What happened with her as that tenant then?
So she lived there happily until she decided that she wanted to move closer to her family who lives down by Yosemite, and
Mhm.
she bought her own house. So she
Sure.
lived there for about 2.5 years until she decided to buy her own house. And so at that point in time, it was January 2020.
Oh,
I'm sorry, January 2021 when she
okay.
told me this. So we are in the middle of, we can't evict anybody. I've got now I'm only working the one job. I'm not working the two jobs. So if the tenants don't pay that their rents, I can't
Mhm.
afford their mortgage. And so I really had a lot of soul searching to do with what did I want to do with this property? Did I just want to sell it? I mean, now the property was worth like $130,000 more than when I bought
Wow.
it for. Yeah. California, when I bought it for 2.5 years before. And so, there was like a whole lot of like soul searching I was having to do. And I kind of had a short period of time because, she was moving out in about a month and a half. And so I kind of just had to figure out what I wanted to do.
Gotcha. So because of those constraints, especially through the pandemic and in California, where restrictions are still very high as a much more tenant-friendly state, I think we can all agree that that was what made the decision for you that you should sell that property.
Yes.
Gotcha. And it sounds like once again, you mentioned you did well still on that sale. Cool. It might have appreciated since then, but you were still able to do well on that property. You had the mortgage covered, and then you were able to still sell for a higher price, only a few years later.
Yes. And then I wasn't done being a landlord. I just wanted to change my model. And that money gave me the opportunity to then I did a 1031 exchange, but I said I had to decide like what did I want to do? Did I want to buy, did I want to keep this house or what? And so then I came across the whole idea of rent by the room models. And so I knew I had this amount of money for a down payment. So I kind of knew what my price range was. And so I started looking for houses that might suit me to move to that sort of model instead.
Gotcha. Did you still have that very first rental? The
Yes.
first house that you bought, did you
I
still have tenants there?
yes. I had a tenant. Yeah, I had a tenant there. She lived there for like 9 years.
Wow.
But I was about ready to evict her anyways, because her dogs did damage the house. But I just wanted to get rid of that property. And after I found the first house, I then found the second house that I loved so much that we'll talk about more. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get rid of both of those properties and completely switch to this model.
Oh, wow. So, okay, so we sold the first one then as well.
I did.
So, gotcha. So did you do a 1031 with both of those properties?
Did.
Gotcha. And then so you were able to sell those two properties, defer your taxes through the 1031, and then you bought the rooming house. And you bought two properties with that.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So within 3 weeks, I sold two houses, and then within, and then I also bought two houses. So
wow.
Yeah.
And that's in a short time period. And those new properties are also in California, correct?
Yes, but one is 50 minutes away to the west, and the other one's 45 minutes away to the west. Wait, they're an hour and a half away from each other, so I can't go to each property. So they're a little bit of a jaunt.
Gotcha.
But I couldn't afford the amount of money I had. I couldn't afford that model to be as successful in the city. So I had to space out. Also, when you're renting by the rooms, the whole goal is to find houses with large rooms. And what you're going to find ideally is historic homes, older homes. They tend to have more rooms. But in downtown Sacramento, sure, we have those, but they're $1 million+ bucks. So instead, I went to Woodland, which was the first one, and I bought the house for $669. It immediately appraised for like $730, but it was an 8-bedroom, 5.5 bathroom house. So that was the first one.
So how were you able to get that first one if it was appraising for much higher? Do you think there was something that occurred or some reason that you were able to get that house for then under 700,000? Really?
I think that people don't always know what their houses are worth, and this is one way my neurodivergent brain works. I am really good at knowing what an appraisal is going to come in at. Gotcha. Like I can look at it, I can figure out. I'm good at research. It's what I'm really good at it. And so I'm really good at looking and filling out comps and everything else. But how many people need an 8-bedroom, 5.5 bathroom house?
Not so many. Not so many.
So, it's just one of those things where it was kind of a little bit of a kismet, I feel like, and so I bought that house. And I started working on that house first. It actually was being rented as 2 separate units. Like the downstairs was 3 bedrooms, 3 baths. That was being rented by a family, and then upstairs was actually already rented by the room. So when I came in, I didn't have to touch one of those.
Gotcha.
So the family downstairs moved out. I just had to remodel it from its 1980s glory and furnish it, get it ready, and rent out those 3 rooms. So that took me till July.
Okay.
So
now, you had mentioned that one of the reasons you didn't want to put a new tenant in one of those properties during the pandemic was that you were concerned about not being able to evict or that they wouldn't pay. Did you feel that same way when you then inherited these tenants that were renting by the room?
They had been there for years. And I figured, their rents are low, and they still are. But they had been there for years coexisting. So I was just like, well, I don't have to worry about it for right now. There's no drama. But the joys of the rent by the room, when I'm looking at the amount of money, like as long as half of my tenants are paying their rent, I'm fine. Half. So the other half is all coming back, right? So, what's the chances that even that half aren't going to be paying?
That half are paying.
So I really felt like a sense like that I wouldn't have to worry about that at least as much. And that's really what I was looking at when I was looking before that at, well, I could buy a duplex or multiplex. I was constantly calculating, well, how many of these units would I have filled to pay the mortgage? And that was always a thought I had. So as long as half of these tenants are paying rent, I'm fine.
Well, and we think about that in a lot of ways with even like the debate that always exists between single families and multifamilies, right? Single family, fine, you might get a little more rent because it's the full house that you're actually renting. But if you have a vacancy or if they're not paying, you have nothing, right? A multifamily, great, you have 2, 3 units. If you at least have one tenant that's paying within that, you have something kind of coming in, even if you have a vacancy or somebody that's not paying on the other side. So that absolutely makes sense. So did you feel with this property that you were also able to make more money renting by the room than if you had rented the whole unit by itself?
Yeah, 100%. So, I'm going to be honest. Like I said, I take pride in the fact that I provide beautiful furnished homes at affordable prices to people, but don't like be confused. I am making really good money at doing it, which has worked out because the other house, so after that one, the second house I bought that I felt called to purchase, it took me until February to finish that one.
To finish the rehab.
Yes. So, and even then, things have changed as far as plans and everything else, but I've been able to use that money to help pay all those bills too. So,
Nice.
Luckily, with all of the things I have going on, I haven't had to come out of pocket for any of the properties because of that. So I'm not, I haven't made any money. You could look at my taxes that I filed last year, but I've made a ton of equity. And yeah, so and the properties are taking care of themselves, which actually is my number one goal, because I see these as retirement plans. I'm not seeing these as, I work full time. My husband works full time. We both have decent paying jobs. We don't need the money right now, but I don't want to work until I'm 60. Like I actually had hoped to become self-employed this year, but after with the interest rates and everything, it's just, I'm not buying houses like I did last year, because I ended up buying a third in November. So like I bought 3 houses that I had to flip, furnish, all this stuff in last year. And I love it. I really, really found out that I enjoyed that. I never would have thought that. I never would have expected that I'd know I could figure out how to decorate houses or anything else. So I learned a lot about myself in the last year because of this. A lot of changes, a lot of life changes.
That is, I was going to say, to buy 3 houses, most people were really struggling trying to find any type of property to buy in 2021 with how high prices were. We still had the lower interest rates, but just the cost of homes themselves were just very high. So for you to be able to, I was already impressed when you said that you were able to do the 1031 exchange for 2 properties in the state of California, but then to actually say now that there's actually a 3rd property that you were able to pick up in there is incredibly intriguing. So I do want to get to the 3rd property. But with these 2 rooming houses, so those 2 are still the rooming houses now, correct?
Well, one is no longer a rooming house because it had some unexpected tenants, and they're not living ones. So again, I'm buying historic houses in historic areas. So the second house I bought was a 7-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. I paid $419 for it. It appraised for $472.
Wow.
And it's on Main Street, on Main Street, USA, super adorable town in the Gold Rush, right? And I felt compelled to buy this house. I was told it used to be a brothel. Okay, there's some fun history there. But again, it's 7 bedrooms. So I'm like, this is perfect for what I do, right? And then I get moving into, start doing what I do. And I should have known when I had my home inspection. My home inspector actually was like, no, I'm not going to inspect this house. And I was like,
really?
He's like, you don't want to
Did he see it or just automatically?
He got there and he said, and he's never said this before, never since, but he got there and he said, you do not want, he's like, you don't want to buy this house, do you? I said, yes, I really do. He's like, you don't want to buy this house. And I was like, no, I really do. And he's like, I don't really want to inspect this house. And he's like, because it's so big and it has so many windows. Okay. The Woodland house, 30.
He's getting paid. He should do it.
And this is 3,200 square feet. So like, you just did it like 3 weeks ago, as a matter of fact. And then when I got there to do the walkthrough with him, he said, what if the house is haunted? And I was like, I don't care, but so now in hindsight, I was like, oh my gosh, like he knew. He knew, and I did ask him, I was like, have you had experiences with ghosts before? And so he told me that he had. And my real estate agent had been there, and she had a weird experience there that day where she heard a noise that sounded like the house is literally on a creek, like the foundation is the retaining wall for the creek. And so she had heard a noise behind her, which would have been the creek side. So she figured that maybe he was out there like checking the back of the house or something, but then she saw him walking around on the porch in the front of the house. And so she had like, when we started having that conversation, I was kind of like, whatever, like, I don't care. But come to find out, the house is extremely haunted.
Oh my God.
It's kind of been insane. So when I saw the house, I realized that if I closed off these two doors, there could be, and I could put in a kitchenette, and I could have a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment. And then I would have 5 bedrooms, 1 bath. I put in another bath. So it'd be 5 bedrooms, 2 baths, upstairs, down, basement apartment downstairs.
And that the upstairs, the 5 bedrooms was to be rented by room, right?
Yes.
So you had the small apartment with the kitchenette, and then you had the 5 rooms with now the 2 baths that would be rented individual rooms.
Exactly. And I had hopes that the apartment I would do Airbnb, but mainly it's also so that way I could use it to come visit, right? Come stay and enjoy the whole area, which, because I love antique shopping. And so that was the plan. And then my first tenant moved in, and she called me like 2 days later, and she's like, I have to tell you, it gets kind of wild around here at night. She told me like she was hearing like balls bouncing. Actually, I had 3 people who told me that, unrelated to one another, at night. Like a child's footprint appeared on the stairs. Handprint appeared on the fridge. She lasted 3 months.
Oh my God. And she just felt scared, uncomfortable there. That's why she left.
Yeah, she was done. And when I was starting to talk to, people in the area, they're like, yeah, nobody ever lived in this house for very long. And I was like, oh man, there's no way these real estate agents did not know that this house was haunted. There's no way. Which of course is against the law. Like, I should have been notified. And I'm not saying I probably, again, would have probably still bought it, because I wouldn't have thought anything of it. So I underestimated just how haunted this house is. So what I ended up doing is, now the apartment is actually rented out short or medium term. So the tenants I have in there, they've been in there for like they were supposed to be in there for 3 months, but I don't think they're planning on moving. They love it so much.
Yeah.
And of course they still have deal with spirits, but less so downstairs than upstairs. Upstairs is
interesting.
Is much creepier at night. But so I ended up turning the upstairs into an Airbnb.
Well, okay, so now you got an Airbnb with a haunted place. What's going to happen now when people come for a night or two?
Well, I do advertise that it's haunted. And so I do have a fair amount of paranormal investigators that are coming out and coming through there. Many of them are like, this is the most haunted place we've ever been. But I mean, I felt like I needed to say that. One, it's not fair for people who are sensitive to come in and honestly, I realized it when we did the final walkthrough. I looked at my real estate agent and my handyman. We got into the last room during our final walkthrough, and I said, I don't like this room. There's a girl in the closet. And they just looked at me like I was crazy. So I actually like had it rented out. I had a paranormal group come in. I didn't tell her anything. It was like a friend of a friend set it up. She walked in. First thing she did was walk into that room and said, there's a girl in that closet. And I was like,
really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
First thing. So I knew nothing about this house. I'd never been there at night. I had, like at this point in time, and the first time I'd ever been there at night, like there was like no furniture. There was like the sofas were in there. But then that was just boxes full of furniture. So when they all came through there, but yeah, and that was the first time where a guy was walking going, is somebody bouncing a ball? And I was like, no, nobody's bouncing a ball. And then the tenant 3 days later told me that somebody was bouncing a ball.
You're doing the same thing.
And so yeah, so it I said it's been a thing that I did not expect. And I actually generally
no, you would not expect a house to be haunted. 100% not.
And I'm not really like, I do struggle with Airbnbs because there's so many people out there who need affordable housing and they just don't exist while we have all these Airbnbs. But I also justify it to myself because I'm like, nobody wants to live in this house because
like you couldn't make it the long-term rental because of this.
One thing to visit, but it's a whole other thing to like live there. And the spirits like me, but they still mess with me all the time. And it's frustrating, man. These guys, I know it's gotta be guys because only guys can be this annoying. But and there's a lot of them, like no joke. There's a whole family plus more that lives there or doesn't live there. But they like to move things. And so it frustrates me because so my mom, I don't believe in spirit ghosts, like, okay. And now she has stayed there 5 times with me. And now on the 5th time, her glasses went missing. So the first time her glasses and her cell phone moved, and she was like, that's unusual. But stuff has happened every single time she's there. So her
Wow.
glasses went missing because they do like to move things. And I haven't been able to find them. So she went from I don't believe in ghosts to it seems totally natural, normal to go to Walmart to buy a whiskey to try to bribe the ghost to bring you back your glasses in 5 visits.
Wow. I love the way that you've made this work. And also you've really found such like a niche that now fine, you're on Airbnb, but because once again, it doesn't really make sense as a long-term rental in the state, but you're finding a lot of people that would like to have this experience. So you're really providing more than just kind of that housing or, you know, a place for them to stay while they're visiting the town, is that they actually really kind of get this experience with the spirits, which is just very unique.
Yeah, and not everybody wants to deal with that. And I always tell them, you don't want to deal with it, just tell them, like, leave me alone. They usually do, and then they torment me later by like hiding I have some placemats, and we had like a girls' weekend there because it's in wine country. And one of my friends wanted nothing to do. She was like super afraid of the ghost. And so they behaved all weekend, but then those placemats went missing and it took me 2 days to find them. So it's like some grand gesture. But like, I also feel like I have to tell them because they do mess with the lights. I got a call from a group, there's 8 people staying there, and they're like PG&E workers. So these are people who understand electronics and electrics and stoves probably, but the stove just didn't work one day.
Yeah.
And it's just like, if people didn't know that the house was haunted, they might think that I'm a slumlord, and it's not really like, oh no, they're just messing with the lights. That's why that light's not working today. It'll be fine.
Yeah, this is what they're playing with you, especially probably since they were then electric company and gas company workers. It's kind of ironic for them to then start turning off appliances and lights.
Yeah. So sorry that you bought those take and bake pizzas. But yeah, there's nothing you can do about that today.
At least these spirits have a good sense of humor. They're not like, you know, necessarily like endangering the lives.
There's nothing malicious. If it was malicious, I don't even, it would definitely not, you know, it wouldn't be safe. Because that's one thing I look at, you know, like, is this house good enough for me? If it's not good enough for me, it's not good enough for another tenant. And that's kind of one of the rules I live by as a landlord, right? Like, you know, when I hear people complaining, like, so I just put air conditioning in the house. So first time it's had air conditioning in 115 years. But I'm just like, I wouldn't want to live in California without air conditioning. So I know most of the town doesn't have it, but I'm sorry, I wouldn't live here without it. So why would I expect somebody else to live here without it?
100%. I think we need to, you know, find that balance between like, one, yes, this is a business, 100%. We're all in this to make money. But on the other hand, we also have to kind of remember that humanistic element of really what we're doing is we're providing other humans with a place to live and call home. So there is that balance between that. So I'm happy that you actually appreciate it, that you think ahead to that and appreciate it. One more question about the haunted house here. Was there ever a point that you said, maybe let's go through some different processes to remove these spirits? Or to you, is it their home too? So let's make the best of the situation we can.
Kind of both. So I kind of feel like is their home too. They were there before I was, right? It's like people who get upset that there's like coyotes in their neighborhood, and I'm like, they were here first. Like, I don't understand what your problem is, right? That's such a human thing to do, right? So part of me is like that, but also part of me goes like, hanging out in my basement, is that really where you want to spend your eternity? So I have been
not my first choice, I'll say that. I'm sure it's a lovely house, but probably not my first choice.
And so Steve, who's in my basement, he was a shady character in real life. And so I just expected that he's there because he's afraid of judgment. And so he feels like it's better. But I actually was talking to his daughter, who's like 86. And she's just like, why can't you just let them be? Because she knew I was having paranormal investigators come in. And I was like, she's like, why can't you just let him rest in peace? And I was like, Yolanda is hanging out in my basement, resting in peace.
And throwing a ball around every night. Like, that's, you know, or we don't know if that's necessarily Steve here, but if, you know, once again, it's not like he's letting your tenants rest in peace either. So
yeah, but he told us his name, is how I know who it is. But yeah, he was a bootlegger. He went to jail for trying to sell stolen gold to the government twice. Like he went to federal prison twice for that. There's just all sorts of
That was
crazy.
one of the other questions I was going to ask, was if you knew if there was either some type of event or death in the house, or who had lived there previously, and if that's who it was that were these spirits. So we already have Steve the bootlegger was one.
Yeah. So no, his host, like almost his whole family's there. His wife is there, his daughter's there, her husband's there. And then there's a whole bunch more. But one of the problems I had when researching it, because I do, and I have a binder probably like this thick full of
Oh, wow.
articles, is that it was run as a boarding house. And so I know the owners, but unless their names pop up in news articles, I cannot find, I will never know the people who live there. So were there murders there? Yes, there were, when it was a boarding house. And bar, saloon. But when it was a brothel, when it was all these things, like, because again, we're back to 1870. The house is 1906. I don't know why, because the house dates back to 1877. And in like the fire maps of insurance maps of 1895, the house is the same shape it is now. So I'm not sure why it's claimed to be in 1906.
Right.
Because it was the exact same shape in 1895.
Yeah.
But it's been there for a long time. And so
yes,
and it's just a crazy area where we had miners literally dying every single day. I had several that lived in the house. One of them was the son of the owner, fell down the mine shaft after going to a party all night, fell asleep and fell down the mine shaft and died. Another man who broke his neck, and they brought him back to the boarding house instead of to the hospital. So it's like there's all sorts of tragedies that happen. So with the mine, people were dying left and right. So we have that. We have the natives that were displaced. We have the brothels. We have the Chinese workers that were brought in and not treated very well. So there was just a whole lot of trauma in the area.
Wow.
So, and then Monte Creek, right next to the cemetery. I've got a lot going on. But
no, 100%. I come out to San Francisco a couple times a year, and I'm gonna have to look up this Airbnb. I'm gonna have to reach out to you when I do. I kind of need to come to this, and also one thing that I'm very big on is clearly research, right? That's also my background professionally. So I'm so interested in a lot of these stories. So we're gonna have to dive into some of those next time I come out to San Francisco. But let me ask you a couple questions about the room renting, because I know that's a topic that a lot of our ladies have been considering. So when you then have your different tenants there, do you give each person an individual lease?
Yes.
Yes.
Every person has an individual lease because and they're all different amounts of time. Some of them are month to month where I charge more. Some of them are short term. Some of them are long term. Do
you ever do any of them like week to week? Like that's a very popular thing here in New York. You do the month to month.
Yeah.
That's the shortest you do.
I just, for me, although they all have their own locks, I just don't know how many people would want to feel comfortable living long-term with revolving rooms,
100%. 100%. So most month to month, maybe a little bit longer term than that, like those midterm rentals, like a 3 to 6 month type lease. So, and you mentioned locks. So does every bedroom door have its own lock?
Yes. I use, so first I was drilling out the doors to put in the key padlocks. Well, then I found that there's actually locks that are just the handles with numbers on it. So the third house, that's what it got. The first two actually drilled holes in all the doors.
And then you're like, okay, never again.
Never again. Because I can't do keys. I mean, when I'm talking about 8 bedrooms, 7 bedroom, and now the Sacramento house, the one I bought in November, is 5 bedroom. There's no way. Plus front door, back door, gates. I can't. Like me and my ADHD, this is never going to happen. So they're all on codes.
Gotcha. And then do you have like a master code that you can go into all of them in case of emergency, things like that? But otherwise, then they each have their own individual lock on their door.
Yes. And then in each of the houses, I have a lockbox. In the basements, well, these two have basements, but I have a lockbox that have the master keys as well. In case it doesn't work, in case their code doesn't work for whatever reason. Sometimes it happens with those kinds of things. And so I have that. And then, so if they call me at 10 o'clock at night, I'm not driving out there, but here's the code, get in that. And then I'm going to come out there. I'm going to change the code.
Correct. Is there a specific brand of keypad that you use that you would recommend to people?
It just depends on what you're looking for. So like the Airbnb, I have an August smart lock with the control pad. I like to be able to do that. But for the long-term rentals, I don't need that. And like I said, for the exterior doors, most of my doors are quick sets, and I like to be able to change those locks. So I do the smart,
Right.
those. But the internal doors, like I said, I was using the quick set locks in there, but I recently found on Amazon like just normal doorknobs that have the code on it, so I don't actually have to put holes in doors. And so that's what I put in the last house, and it's worked out pretty good.
Gotcha. I know exactly what you're talking about with that, which is right on the handle. That makes it easier, less things to kind of have to, less work to kind of have to do to control that. So nice. So then they have their own bedrooms with their own locks. Then do they get access? Clearly they get access to your bathroom, but do they also get access to kitchen? Do they get access to a living room space that's shared?
Not always. So like my
Okay.
Woodland house is upstairs, downstairs. The downstairs has a full kitchen and it has a living room, which they never use. They never use the living
Okay.
room, they never use the dining room. They kind of use the kitchen. Upstairs actually has a kitchenette, which basically just doesn't have an oven. It
Yeah.
has, they have a hot plate, they've got microwaves and air fryers and all sorts of stuff up there.
I love
So
there's an air fryer. Like what, like
yeah,
that's just become such a staple in the American
so
home.
I use it all the time. So I bought, they didn't have
Once
one.
again, you want it, you'd want them to have it, right?
Exactly. So, but they basically what they have is they say kitchenette, but I would consider it a break room. It's like it's it's a large enough size, and they got a table. I put a TV in there for them. But I mean, most people who rent by the room, they just want to hang out in their room. Like they're
Right.
just not people who are looking for active social engagement. So this wouldn't probably be their ideal rentals. And actually, one of the things that surprised me the most is who my tenants are. I kind of expected like Woodland is close to UC Davis, that I'd be looking at a lot of students. My
Mhm.
tenants are mostly over 50.
Really interesting. Okay. How do they usually find you?
So originally I was using Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. Well, I just
Mhm.
had a sign made, room for rent, with my phone number on it. And I'll tell you, I get more hits off of that than anything else.
Where do you put that sign? Like in front of the
My
property?
front yard.
Yep,
Yep.
with just phone number, call me.
And that's
Very
where I
old
get the
school
most
style.
hits, because people get to walk past this beautiful house all the time, because I'm near a bus line, and I'm near the downtown. So I get more, especially serious hits from that sign than I do from anything else. And I just got it
Interesting.
for like $15 on Vistaprint. So
That's fantastic. What a great way to advertise. So that's also like really important because we always, I feel like, are looking for like, oh, do we have to get ourselves on Zillow? Do we have to deal with 1,000 people that are just, looking, casually throughout Facebook Marketplace. So I appreciate the fact that you're just like, no, I just put a sign out, they call me, we get the deal done.
mhm.
Now, have you ever had situations where two of then your room rental tenants don't get along? Or, I'm thinking of like the shared kitchen at an office where who steals somebody's milk, who steals somebody, who eats somebody's leftovers. Do you ever feel like you are getting contacted kind of police between different tenants?
I mean, I let people vent to me,
Yeah.
but I'm not really getting involved. But I do clean these houses, right? So I mean, that's one thing I found, because like, okay, part of it is just because of me, right? I dirty bathrooms and kitchens are things that just, they hurt my soul, and I have to fix them. Like it doesn't even matter. Like even downstairs, I recently had a leak from upstairs that went to downstairs. And so when I had to go into the tenants downstairs, all have their own bathrooms. But I went to her
Right.
bathroom, I was like looking around going like, oh, and I cleaned her whole bathroom. And then she was like, I was like, I'm not gonna say anything about it just because I couldn't, but I was just like, I'm like, I had to clean it. I'm sorry, I could not leave it like that. But yeah, so I go in and I clean it, but I'm kind of amazed sometimes. I'm like, you guys, like seriously,
Well,
but
I
it's
can
just like,
see
that's
that
their mess,
though.
that's their mess. Nobody wants to clean up somebody else's mess, so therefore nobody's cleaning up their own messes somewhat. So I just go in and clean it, and then there's no fight, no fuss. And
Well, I could definitely see that, right? If you have multiple people sharing it, everybody has different levels of cleanliness. Everybody, then it's who's going to take responsibility to really clean up after the other people. So I can see that kind of being difficult. But the fact that you personally do it rather than hire a cleaner is very interesting. Now, do you clean their individual rooms or do you clean the common spaces?
I just
Then
clean it.
whatever they have behind their locked doors, then
I don't know what it is. Yeah.
gotcha.
Unless I have a
And
reason to go into their room, like, I have one tenant who actually has only been there a month this year. He lives
yeah,
in Florida. And so, but he does jobs out here, so he just keeps the room for, you know, when he has to come out here. And he was looking for some mail, which I always throw under his door, so I had to go into his room because he asked me to look for some mail for him. But so I was like looking around like, I can't dust this, right? Like it'd be wrong if I can't.
The dust is the biggest issue in the room. You know, you're very fortunate compared to some other situations, right?
Well, I think that's the joys, and that's one of the reasons like cleaning your own houses is actually super beneficial, because that tenant that I kicked out, her dog really did destroy my house. She got a new dog, and I really learned more about, okay, you need to do inspections, and like, especially if you allow pets, you need to do really regular inspections, and stuff like that. So that was a learning experience for me, but that's one of the joys of cleaning my own house is I know when the drain is plugged. I know when, you know, like, because a lot of times they don't tell you that stuff, which I don't know why, when the sink is leaking or, you know, whatever. So when I clean my own houses, I actually get to see what's going on so I can fix it. And again, I think that is one of the benefits of the rent by the room models, because they're only renting a room, not the house. I can walk into that house anytime I want. I just can't go into their rooms anytime I want, which makes it a lot easier for whether that be getting things serviced or, you know, just to check to see how my investments are doing, because, you know, these are big investments for me. And so I think that's one of the joys. Another thing that I really enjoy about the rent by the room model.
Gotcha. And you're actually right. Like the bedrooms would be the least should be the least of the concern when you think about it. There's no appliances there. There could be no water damage, no leaking, no issue. Once again, a bedroom is 4 walls, right? Like there's really not so much of a concern there. So really you get to kind of have those inspections for the rooms that are really the most important and integral to the house. So that makes perfect sense. If somebody was looking to get started in renting by the room, what would you say would be the most important piece of information that they should know?
So the first thing I just do is I go to, you know, Realtor, and I look for houses with more than 5 bedrooms. That's the most they'll let you search for. And then when I find them, see if you can find some that are affordable. From there, I go to looking at Craigslist for the rooms for rent to see if there's like a need, and kind of just look and see what's out there. You know, oftentimes, again, if you're willing to put in a little bit extra work, you can find these houses. And, you know, again, it's been pretty amazing for me, as far as even financially, to do this, but I've actually, you know, quite enjoyed it. I really like a lot of my tenants a lot, surprisingly.
We should though, but yes.
So I quite enjoy them. You know, like I'm not super frustrated by them, which is always good. But you know, just really have to do that research to see, like, is there already an inundation of rooms for rent in this area? You know, if you know the area well enough, you'll know how our tenants, you know, like what are the rent prices. So usually I charge basically almost the same as what a 1-bedroom apartment. Actually now it's less, but when I started it was, but now the prices of apartments have skyrocketed. Because I'm paying for all the utilities, I'm paying for, you know, so that is all taken in consideration. And I actually think this is one of the reasons why I mostly have older tenants, is because I feel like most young people these days do not want to be roommates. They feel like they should only have their own apartments, and that's why they're going to live with their parents until they're 35, because until they can afford to live with their parents. Whereas older people were like, oh, we're saving money, who cares, let's have some roommates, right? And so
it's just me, like, where am I going to go? How much space do I really need?
And it's also convenient, like, and again, I thought, oh, it's going to be all young people, because how ideal is this? I provided all the pots, the pans, the microwave,
cleaning,
all the stuff. You know, like you literally just have to show up with your clothes and go buy some food and you're set. So I thought this would be perfect for people starting out. But people who are starting out, no, they will wait with their parents until they absolutely can't, and they can afford to have their own 5-bedroom house or their own. So it's shouldn't be a surprise that I have most of mine are older.
No, I agree. That's been a pretty big transition. I remember after I graduated college, you know, my mid-20s, that really the way that you found a place to live, right? I couldn't afford to live on my own, but it was something that you then went on Craigslist back in the day and you looked up roommates. And I remember looking at places and I didn't ever really cared much about like what the room looked like or the setup of the house. It was almost that you were interviewing the other people. It was more like, do I want these people to be my friends or not?
Mhm.
And that's really what you were looking for. But once again, I think a lot more of the younger generations are staying at home with their parents. Once again, costs are also much higher. So there's also another reason to say, you know, what I used to pay to rent a room with 2, 3 roommates is very different than what that looks like now. So I think a lot of people are also kind of forced to stay home. So now you have that older generation that is then looking, what can they do to save money? And if they're on their own, they need what they need. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing not only about what great ways there are to be able to rent rooms, but also this haunted house. So you're gonna have to make sure to send me the link to that. I'm gonna put that down in the show notes, in case anybody's in the area want to check that out. But I think that's such an interesting niche, and I really appreciate how you have cared about the history of the house that you bought and about the lives of the people that have actually lived there previously and live there currently. So I'm really happy to see how you've now incorporated that into your business model. That's really kind of a unique hybrid.
Well, thank you. Yes. I think, all of us are a part of history, right? So, and it's just a continuous thing. So if we don't appreciate the history of the past, obviously it's hard to do so for the future. And, why not? We should care about the people of the past, just like we should care about the people now and in the future. So
Right.
I think it's all kind of integral to one another. And if you want to check it out on Facebook or Instagram to see the videos of things moving in the middle of the night, or whatever, it's Bethany's Home Sweet Haunted Home.
Gotcha. Last question. I have to ask, why Bethany?
I don't know. I was told that was the name of the girl in the closet, the front
Oh,
closet.
was the girl in the
I don't know if
closet.
that's true or not. But I just went with it.
Ooh, I love it. All right. Well, Elsie, thank you very much for sharing your story today. I greatly appreciate you being here.
I appreciate you having me.
Of course. For any of our other listeners, do make sure to hit subscribe, whether you're listening on podcast or if you are watching us on YouTube, so you do not miss our next episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. We release new episodes every single Tuesday. Thanks for listening and see you next week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're feeling stuck in your real estate journey, visit lady-landlords.com/roadmap to book a one-on-one workshop with me. I'll help you determine your next best strategy. Or you could subscribe to our newsletter for exclusive tips and offers. Invest with confidence. Become a Lady Landlord today.